Oh, people are in. Okay, Jennifer's just hit the recording button. So everyone, I am so very pleased to introduce our next speaker of this afternoon. He is a professional engineer, and he's made a career out of using these skills and talents to make a positive impact on people and the planet. His name is Lloyd Heupel. He's the project director of Enviro Stewards, Inc. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Jean. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am going to just share my screen. Enter slideshow mode. Okay, just to confirm, everybody can see the first slide there?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks again for having us. I guess it was our fault with all the technical problems this morning calling in from Canada, but I'm really happy that it worked out. I've actually had the pleasure to visit Indiana a few times for some P2 conferences over the years. So hopefully, as was discussed over the break in coming years, people will be able to get together in person again. It's always more beneficial when you can meet people face to face. So my presentation is on pollution prevention in general and how it's a great approach for sustainable savings. So I was given an hour, including time for questions. I don't know if I will get to a full hour, but I will not go over an hour because I know that there's a time limit and there's an agenda to achieve as well. Yeah, as mentioned in the introduction, so I'm a professional engineer in the province of Ontario and a licensed toxic reduction planner in Ontario. And unfortunately, that's no longer applicable because our province unfortunately discontinued their toxic reduction program. And it actually ends this December, which is unfortunate. I've been on Enviro Stewards for 15 years, and I'm a project director there. A bit more about myself personally. Like I say, when you're at a conference, you have these opportunities to meet people and say, who are you, where are you from, what do you do? And so this is my way to virtually do it, but I live in Waterloo, Ontario. So you can see where that is on the map in relation to Indiana, so not too far away. And personally, I enjoy playing hockey. Photography is a hobby, and I enjoy hanging out with my family. I have 3 kids and a wife, and over the past few years of COVID, we have had lots of opportunities to hang out together at home, which has been great. To start out, just wanted to share one of my favorite photos. It's not technically brilliant, but I just love the depth of this forest, and I think it's a good starting point for our discussion because I think no matter where we come from, what industry we're in, what our views are on politics or anything else, I think we can all agree that this type of scene is something that we want to conserve and keep it for us to enjoy, for our kids to enjoy, and for future generations to enjoy as well. So I think it's always nice to cast a big picture about what we're here for as environmental professionals. And I'm sure everybody would agree that this is a beautiful scene. And as our roles as environmental professionals, let's keep this serene setting for generations to come. A bit about Enviro Stewards, if you're not familiar with this. So our mission is to cultivate resilient businesses and improve lives. Get into a little bit how we do that. So when we first started out, we've been around since 2000, and we used the term pollution prevention quite widely at that time. It was just the era. Pollution prevention was an emerging term in our industry. And so we use that as a description of what our services are. And as we'll see in the presentation over the years, our language has changed as things have changed in society and the way we talk about things. But that was our initial niche, is pollution prevention. And under that banner, of course, and we'll talk about this later as well, we offer services from energy efficiency, toxic reduction, solid waste reduction, net zero carbon, which is an emerging issue. A lot of our customers are wanting to get to net zero carbons. We're helping along that path. So a lot of new terms since 2000. It's moved on from pollution prevention to include a lot more of these, which we'll see shortly. The way that we improve lives is we help sponsor something called the Safe Water Social Ventures. This provides, establishes locally owned and operated businesses in Uganda and East Africa that build and sell these biosand filters, this blue thing in the photo here. And Bruce, who's the founder of Enviro Stewards and started Safe Water Social Ventures, gave a talk about this program. So later on, you're welcome to Google it on YouTube If you search for Better Than Charity, you'll be able to find it. Some of the things we're affiliated with that are important to us. So we're a living wage employer in our region. We're also water efficient certified business by the region of Waterloo. We're part of the RSI, which is setting carbon targets for companies in Waterloo region. We've so far exceeded those targets and working to reduce it more. We're also a certified B Corporation. And I think in the States, you might be more familiar with B Corporations, Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia. There are a lot of big companies for B Corporations. Essentially, it's using business as a force for good is their tagline. And so we thought that was important for society, and that everything's not about profit, but it's also about improving society and improving the environment and conserving it. So we became a certified B Corporation, one of the first in Canada, actually, and the movement has grown since then. And we're also involved in the Sustainable Development Goals through the UN. So we want an award partly based on our work with the Safe Water Social Ventures. So I bring these up because we like to walk the talk. We're an engineering firm, so we go into other facilities and tell them what we suggest they do, working with their team. But we also want to make sure that we're doing what we say as well. So that's why we get involved in these sorts of things, and that it's very important that we're affiliated with organizations like this. We're familiar with quite a broad range of facilities. So manufacturing in general is our specialty. So from pharmaceutical to automotive, some aerospace, and then also food and beverage is a key sector for us as well. So we work with Nestle and Constellation, Maple Leaf Foods, and Bimbo Canada, which is Grupo Bimbo from Mexico. They recently purchased a Canadian company and changed it to Bimbo Canada. So they have facilities across North America. We do our work in Canada and the United States. We've done a few international projects. And aside from that, also the Safe Water Social Ventures is, of course, international. We actually just had a staff person get back from California. She's doing 2 jobs for us in California recently. So I want to start out with, again, I think it's important in a presentation like this just to define our terms. Like when we talk about pollution prevention, what does it actually mean and how do you go about it? So Environment Canada, which is our federal government body for the environment, defines P2 as avoiding creation of pollution and waste instead of trying to clean it up or manage it after the fact. I think that's a fairly good definition, actually. And I like to boil it down to P2 is a preventative approach. And it's preventative. And because it's a type of approach or methodology, it's also multifaceted. So as I alluded to before, you can use the P2 approach if you're dealing with toxics, looking at electricity savings, thermal energy waste you want to address, wastewater issues, which is both a waste and also potentially introducing pollutants into the sewer system that might have regulations for the concentrations. Food waste is also an emerging thing that we're doing more and more work with. Even though it's not would be considered a toxic substance or pollutant, it's still considered waste, and there are better uses for it than just putting it in the garbage or for landfill. Water conservation, and again, as I mentioned, greenhouse gas emissions, net zero carbon, those are all, I think, fair to say are under the P2 umbrella as we've done work with people and starting to listen to what society is saying and what companies are asking for. This is the type of assessments we use, but I'd say it's all under the P2 umbrella. And similar to your group today, it's a wonderful example of this as well in work, where you have this ESP group and you're working towards those goals as well, again, under the banner of the pollution prevention approach. And the thing I really like about pollution prevention is that it addresses root causes. It doesn't just try to treat symptoms. It doesn't put a Band-Aid on things. It looks at the root cause and solves that. It's also, as I mentioned, a preventative approach. So preventing problems or waste before they happen. It's very repeatable. So it's multifaceted in all those categories we looked at before, because it's a repeatable system that you can apply in any facility and almost any company and any media, whether it's water, energy, pollutants, etc. It also forces systems thinking. So by that, I mean looking at an entire system and how all the processes and components work together. So as an illustration of that, this is one that we often use because we think it's a nice introduction to the P2 approach. This was a client that had some used solvent, and then they had a vacuum still, and then that would be distilled. The solvent vapors would be condensed. They'd go into a tank and reclaimed. Then they'd actually sell this reclaimed solvent for a profit. Now the still bottom, so once everything's evaporated mostly, would go to a still bottoms tank in this room, an open tank. And then they needed this fan to exhaust all the fumes. So this is the key thing they were interested in, because you're blowing air out your facility, you're wasting a lot of energy and moving a lot of air, and all the heat or cooling that went into that as well. So if you're looking at this from an electricity viewpoint, so just focusing on this fan, you might say, well, just put a more efficient motor in, like maybe a variable frequency drive, a really efficient one, could save some energy. Or if you're coming from a natural gas viewpoint, install the heat reclaim system. So maybe there's some sort of heat exchanger where you could capture the heat going out of the building and put it back in to reduce the heat that's lost. But remember, the root cause was that this fan needed to exhaust fumes from the still bottom tank. So from a P2 solution approach, again, look at the entire system. Don't just focus on that fan, what's happening upstream of the fan as well. And so what the best solution actually ended up being was putting a lid on the still bottom tank and then piping it up to the condenser, condensing it to sell with other reclaimed solvent. And then that solved the exhaust problem because there's less air to move out because it wasn't such an issue anymore with the vapors. So in a sense, the toxic use assessment was a better approach than an energy assessment. At the beginning, you think, oh, just look at the motor, look at how you can reclaim heat. But I think it's a really interesting example that I like using of showing how when you look at the whole system, it gives you better solution when you look at the root cause. And the P2 approach is the ideal methodology for identifying these types of solutions. I think also that P2 is a really emerging issue and something that we should keep pushing in our respective spheres of influence. There are lots of global factors making it important. They're finite resources. So every time we can waste less water, waste less energy, it conserves more for others. In Canada and maybe in the States too, utility costs are increasing quite a bit, and it's becoming very expensive for manufacturers to operate in some areas because of electricity and water and natural gas costs. So if they can reduce those through a P2 approach, then they can be more profitable. As well, climate change, of course, is a big issue, lots of opinions. And one thing that this helps address too is with the P2 approach is reducing environmental footprints. And when we reduce pollutants, reduce greenhouse gases, it doesn't just benefit us, but it actually benefits everybody in the world because climate change doesn't have boundaries. It affects everybody. And then stewardship and sustainability. So these are types of terms that companies are using more and more, we're finding, and it's important to them. And again, P2 fits nicely into that as well. Other factors include customer demand. So customers are choosing who they're buying from based on their environmental policies. It's better PR for those companies as well. Nobody wants to be the next Exxon Valdez in the news. They want to be the good news story. Worker safety. So specifically related to toxics, if you're using fewer harmful chemicals, it's a safer environment for your employees. And of course, legislation and laws. So Canada, we have quite a few at the municipal, provincial, which would be the equivalent of state in the US, and then federal level. Lots of laws and regulations about what you can and can't emit to the atmosphere, to land or water. And it can be very costly to contravene those. And they can also shut you down eventually as well. A really good example of a company who gets this is Maple Leaf Foods. Not sure if you're familiar with this company in the US, but it's quite a large company in Canada. And actually the world's first major food manufacturer to become carbon neutral. So there's a big splash, actually almost a year ago today, about how they became carbon neutral. And we're really proud that we could help them along that journey. Essentially, they had originally targets to reduce water, energy, and waste by 50% by 2025. So we went to their, it was 35 facilities plus to help the teams there identify opportunities to reduce water and energy and their waste, and come with ideas how to do so. And now we're going back and taking a look at the facilities to make sure that the savings they thought they're actually getting, and if there's any additional opportunities that they can implement as well. So for Maple Leaf Foods, again, here they have economic savings, environmental savings. It's great PR for them, and all thanks to taking a P2 approach. Just an example quickly of the type of opportunities that we find. This one is from Maple Leaf Foods, just to give you a bit of a taste for what we're looking at. And then later on, we'll get into more specific examples and case studies. So these three different pieces of equipment, this is a vacuum seal, and it needs water to create a liquid ring to keep the vacuum. This is a rotary screen, so it's used in the wastewater system, and they use water to blast it off to clean it. And then this was for cooling. So this tank is jacketed, so liquid goes in one of these pipes, goes through the jacket around the tank, cools it down, and then comes out and discharges out of the tank. So three different processes that were separate. These various types of water, some just cold city water, some used hot water. And we quantified how much it was costing for each of those streams of water for their respective purpose. And in total, it was over $160,000 per year that they're spending just for what I described for the water use for this particular processes, including the heat involved as well if the water was hot. And so what the solution was because these systems were fairly closely concentrated, so they're geographically close together in the facility. And again, the systems approach, looking at how everything works together instead of just focusing on the vacuum pump or the rotary screen. We're able to see that, what if you took the vacuum seal water from the vacuum pump, use that to cool your process tank, then reuse that water again. And because you're spraying onto a wastewater stream, there's no risk of any contamination because it just goes to the drain after that. So by combining all those things, they're actually saving $110,000 per year by reusing that water as well as the heat associated with it. That's just a good example of the types of things that we find when we do these types of assessment, again, using a systems approach. And that one was specific to Maple Leaf Foods. Another one we really enjoyed talking about is Southbrook Vineyard. So another food example. They had a LEED Gold certified building, so really energy efficient. They did have an audit conducted for energy, and they found about 5% savings, but very long payback, 20 years, which not a lot of people make the decision to go with. So again, we got to know the owner. We went in and found them 40% savings on their energy with just a 4-month payback. And interestingly, you can see in the photo, there's some solar panels. They were installing solar arrays, but because they were able to save so much energy, they didn't have to remove this vineyard in the foreground to install more solar panels. So as a result, as you can see in the text here, there were 1/3 fewer solar panels. So they could keep growing wine in those vineyards. And that saved about $20,000 per year because of that extra wine yield that would have been lost if they put solar panels here. So again, looking at everything all together, it even incorporated saving wine and energy assessment using a P2 methodology. Well, how do you go about doing these types of assessments? So we saw a few examples at a high level of the type of savings and opportunities you can find and what the general approach is. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about an approach that you could take in your own facility. I don't know what various people's roles are at your companies. Maybe you're a champion of P2 and looking to implement these projects and find opportunities, or maybe you have people report to you with opportunities and you need to approve them and decide which ones to go with. So this is the flow on the slide here that we typically use. And I'll go through each of these in a bit more detail because this is sort of the approach and the systematic nature of P2 that I was referring to before that can be applied in many different contexts, whether you're automotive, food, chemicals, pharmaceutical. Again, it's the methodology that's key, not necessarily what industry you're in or what your product is. So for us, we always emphasize that getting an internal team together is a really key foundation to a successful P2 project. So a multidisciplinary team, people from engineering, having management there. So people see that management is committed to this as well. Maintenance, operations, quality assurance, quality control, people from purchasing, anybody you think will have a say in any change that's made. It's good to invite them to the meeting. And if you know there's somebody who might push back, it's always wise to meet with them beforehand, sort of go over what you're going to present, get their buy-in before the meeting so that it's a positive experience for everybody. As there are always people who ask questions or push back, and so to address those before this meeting is a wise idea. But we always say this is key. And so, like I say, we go into facilities and do these types of projects. And so we always ask that the facility have a team that we work with to gain buy-in, because everybody in this room, in that photo, all these people become stakeholders in the decision-making process. So being there from the beginning, they know that they have a say in what happens, and sort of becomes empowering for them that they're part of the decision-making process. And therefore, it's very much more likely that when the opportunities are proposed, and these are the people who have to implement them and follow them, they'll be willing to do so because they were part of the decision-making process all along. Then probably the most challenging part is doing the baseline assessment. So just getting reliable baseline data. So whether this is, this is an automatic sampler that can sample effluent and sanitary sewers. So there's a particular pollutant or chemical that you want to detect or test for to see what your concentration is. You can use this type of equipment. Here's Dave installing a flow meter to measure water consumption. This is recording amp logging of an air compressor. So whatever it is that, again, you want to address in your audit or assessment, you want to be able to measure or log or observe what the current consumption is, because that'll be your foundation for future calculations for what savings would be associated with those. And for us, it's really important that we log things. It adds more time and scope to projects, but we always push to make sure that we can install meters and get your equipment logged. And similarly, it might be something that you want to do as well internally. And later on, I'll show you a few tools that we rely on that you may want to look into for your own internal assessments. This is an example of a customer we were talking to, and they had this ventilation hood. So it, when it's on, it sucks air and blows it out the building. So all the heating or cooling in that room is just exhausted whenever that thing is running. And we wanted to log it using an amp logger, so just clamping it on one of the phases. It's, oh no, the last person knows when they leave at the end of the day, they turn the hood off. It's not running, and then in the morning, the first person in, they turn it back on. Okay, fair enough. And we still decided to log it. And lo and behold, what was happening that was revealed only through logging is that when the cleaning staff came in, they were turning the hood on, and they thought they had to turn it on, but they actually didn't need to turn it on. It was just someone told them at some point, turn the hood on when you come in and turn it off when you leave. So, these people leaving, these people coming, were not aware of what was going on with the cleaning staff. So essentially, hey, cleaning staff, leave the ventilation alone. You do not need to turn it on while you're doing your cleaning during the evening. So a simple example, but it emphasizes, again, the importance of making sure that you log things and not just relying on anecdotes or people's experience to know what's actually going on in your facility. The numbers don't lie, so to speak. Once you've collected all that data, you want to prioritize it. So we use something called the Pareto principle. You may be familiar with that. Essentially, it's the 80-20 rule. And it looks like this in graphical form. So say here you have your processes A through E, whatever it is for your facility you can imagine, then an annual consumption or waste generation. It could be a toxic substance, it could be water use, electricity use, another pollutant. You'd want to focus on process A and B because you're going to get much stronger gains by focusing on them. So that's the Pareto principle. Focus on the 80% of the contributors to your problem, not the remaining few here. So later on, when you've done your first assessment and addressed processes A and B, then you can start coming down here and addressing these. But it's important to prioritize what you want to look at and go for those bigger gains first. So after that, as the example I showed before, you want to be able to quantify what the potential savings are. So you've found what the consumption is, you've done a Pareto analysis. Okay, process A and B is what we want to focus on, or in this example, these three processes, we want to focus on these. Then you can start playing with ideas about, well, what can we do differently to reduce the water consumption, reduce the toxics use, whatever it is, and what are the potential savings if we do that? So your team comes up with a roster of ideas, of initial savings ideas and quantifications. So how much you think you're going to save. And then another important step that we do, and we'd recommend for your facilities as well, is to get that team back together and just review what's been found so far. So typically that group will be the same as the group at the kickoff meeting. And you'll look at the opportunities that you found and also the initial data you found. It's like, hey, here's what we measured. Does this make sense? Does this make sense that process A is using this much of this substance? And then you can sort of validate your background data. That serves as the foundation for your further decisions, and then vet the opportunities. So, hey, here's this idea to reuse water through these 3 different systems. Technically, does this make sense? And then you get agreement. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that might work this way. And someone else might have another suggestion of how to do it differently and still get the same result. And that's fine. You know, people might bring up their own ideas and you might need to tweak your own ideas. But the idea is, again, this is a way to get buy-in for those opportunities. So now everybody's agreed. Yes, technically these make sense. The data looks good. But then more importantly for perhaps upper management is what's the business case? You know, we all work for businesses and business has to make a profit to survive. That's just the nature of the beast. And so preparing a business case for the opportunity is extremely important. You know, sometimes companies will do things because it's the right thing to do environmentally or for worker safety. But the bottom line in monetary terms is very important for making good business decisions. So you want to present it, the savings in the language that your facility speaks. So if you talk about net present value, or if you're just talking about straight line paybacks, anything under 2 years, straight line payback, we'll implement. Or if you're looking at return on investment, so anything above 70% ROI, we'll implement. So you need to know the language that you're, whoever it is making the ultimate decision, or it's a CFO or CEO or president, speaking their business language to communicate business case is also a key step of the process. And then your opportunities can become a table like this. So this is just an example that we use, but you might have your own format. You might have capital planning forms that you use where you could input these projects, you know, with the timelines. And this can become the action plan for the team. So here are the opportunities, you know, 1 through 5. Here's estimated savings, total savings, estimated cost, estimated payback. And then you may have also next steps, you know, or who's responsible in the facility for doing such and such a thing. Which vendors do we need to contact to get quotes for new equipment or a change to a process? So again, this is a nice document that comes out of that whole process, is something tangible to be able to follow as a plan. But of course, you know, everybody jokes about getting reports and they go on a shelf and they collect dust and they're wonderful ideas. But if those ideas aren't actually implemented, then you know, what was the point of going through that exercise to begin with? So of course, implementation is also critical so that you can get those things installed. You can start reducing your toxics use. You can start saving energy or whatever the opportunity is. Implementation can include, you know, project management, can be design, there be some commissioning, some additional reporting, but it's good to show progress. So as an example, this is a pasteurizer who was using 120 gallons per minute of water previously, made a change, we remeasured it, and they're under 20 gallons per minute after the change. So, okay, yep, we projected that these would be the savings. We did some measurements. We verified that these savings are occurring, and then it's a way to verify that you're getting the savings that you anticipated. But of course, you can't measure those and verify them until you've implemented. So let's look at some examples of this methodology applied sort of in the real world. So some examples that we've come across. The first is a process integration study at Campbell's that we did. So process integration at a high level is just matching heat sources and heat sinks. A heat source, another term is waste heat. So this could be mechanical heat from equipment. As equipment runs, there's friction, there's noise, and it can generate heat. Your steam boiler exhaust carries a lot of heat out of your facility. There might be all sorts of heat exchangers. And this heat can be very expensive to get rid of. So a very common industrial process is a cooling tower on your roof where you're getting rid of excess heat from your facility. So you're essentially evaporating water, which reduces the temperature of the water that goes back in to cool the system. And it's this constant loop. But you're losing water each time you evaporate it. And you're running those fans to spin the fans, running the motors to spin the fans inside the cooling tower as well. So it's very expensive to operate. Heat sinks. So these are things like building heating. You always maybe need to heat your building for your staff or in a certain room. So that's where you want to sink some heat. You could preheat your boiler makeup water. So instead of heating water from a very cold temperature that comes in from your city line, you can preheat that. So you're starting from a higher temperature and you'll use less natural gas, for example, to heat it up in your boiler. Or you might have a product or some processed water that needs to be heated, and you can use that heat to preheat that as well. So you go through the facility looking at all your heat sources and sinks, and there's a fairly complex system that you use, like a computer program, to calculate these things. You get graphs like this, and it does sort of a pitch analysis. It essentially tells you which good sinks and sources are a match and which ones are not a match. So after going through this process at Campbell's, there's some very significant energy, natural gas, and water savings. And over $1.6 million per year savings with just a 2-year payback. So that's, again, the value of doing that type of detailed assessment using something called process integration. But again, the approach was the same as I just described us with the kickoff meeting, with the action plan and doing a detailed assessment and looking at how all the systems work together. Also at Campbell's, so I mentioned food loss and waste prevention before, and this is a really emerging thing. I know a lot of people on the call might not be in the food industry, but like I say, it can relate to anything else that you're looking at. The approach is similar, but they had this optical sorter that was sorting carrots. So good product from bad product. And I think it shot compressed air to get rid of bad product. And you can see in this bin here, all the carrots that were rejected. So quite a significant amount. And so it was just running so quickly that the system was just spitting out good carrots with bad carrots as well. So the P2 solution was just to adjust the rate of the optical sorter. So it slows it down. It can have more time to make sure it's only hitting the bad product and getting rid of that. And reprocess the carrots. So some good ones are coming out, we'll put them back in with the next batch and reprocess them. And hopefully they'll make it through. And over $225,000 per year savings just by a simple adjustment on an optical sorter. Another case study that we'll look at is S&C Electric. So they had some bylaw compliance issues. So they're out of bylaw compliance for effluent, and the out of compliance was sporadic. So they were getting these blips in their wastewater treatment system. So you can see here, they're standing in front of part of their treatment system. So they wanted to figure out what they need to do to, deal with that extra loading on their system. Do they need to build more wastewater treatment, expand their capacity, add a new process to it? So yeah, option 1, build more treatment, or option 2, conduct a P2 study. So when we met with them, we were able to describe the P2 approach, and they agreed to that type of study instead of just jumping right to building a better wastewater treatment system, or not necessarily better, but a more expensive one. And what we were finding was that the chemicals in tanks were overflowing to the sewer, which is going into their wastewater treatment system before being discharged to the municipal sanitary system. So this is a photo of what the tank looked like. And so it would overflow to the sewer. What was happening was that small parts throughout the day were being dipped into the tank. No problem at all. They just go in the tank, go back on the rack, move to the next one, go dip in the tank. So sort of an index system. I don't know if you have those at your facility or you've seen one of those before. And then occasionally they'd have larger parts that were, I think, in barrels that we were dipping into the tank. So these much larger items were displacing the chemicals in the tank, overflowing it. Like, hope you can see the red arrows there into the outside tank. And those were going to the drain essentially and getting to their wastewater treatment system. So the pollution prevention solution was to just plug this outer drain. So where it was going to the treatment system, just put a plug in there, install some small pumps, and just pump it right back into the tank. So as a result of that, they had no more bylaw violations. They had economic savings because they could reuse their chemicals. They didn't need to modify their wastewater treatment system because this ended up solving their problem. So again, taking a P2 approach was more environmentally beneficial. There weren't chemicals going to the environment, had economic savings, and they didn't have to build more of a treatment system. TREMEC is another example. So there's some new municipal, provincial, and federal regulations that have come out over the years, and a particular one came out at the time that included methylene chloride. So it had very strict guidelines on the concentrations that you could discharge to the air and to sewer or to the environment in general. And what TREMEC did was essentially they were cleaning out paint totes from automotive companies. So the companies would send them their empty paint totes. Of course, it'd be coated with paint inside. So TREMEC would refurbish these and they'd use methylene chloride to clean it. So again, what do? You have this methylene chloride now they have to deal with because there's this new legislation. They can get in to heavy fines or even forced to being shut down if they can't comply with the regulation. So again, similar to the S&C, two options. They can build a treatment system to deal with methylene chloride or conduct a P2 study. So wisely they chose to go with the P2 approach. And so essentially, again, the problem, the cleaning chemical contravening new environmental regulations. And the root cause of this is that they use methylene chloride as their main cleaning agent. So the P2 solution would be, okay, is there another way that you can clean these totes with using less methylene chloride or no methylene chloride or substituting it with something else? So we did some research, and this photo here is what the solution was, and I'll let you try to guess on your own what that is that he's using there, and I'll just take a sip of water. So the system he's using there is actually baking soda and compressed air. So baking soda and compressed air is shooting out of this pipe, and it becomes an abrasive that just erodes the paint from the containers that they want to remove the paint from. And actually, they did some trials because they were unsure about it, and it cleaned better than the methylene chloride did. As a result, by switching to compressed air and baking soda, they had a 99% reduction in their methylene chloride use. Now, initially, another hesitation they had was that it was more expensive than methylene chloride. This type of system is not cheap. Plus, you need to have, compressed air, which is expensive to make, and the consumables of the system. However, in the long term, we were able to demonstrate that it's less expensive because there'd be no surcharge violation fines. There'd be no fees or annual reporting requirements. So under these government legislations, you have to prepare annual reports to the government. So you have to hire a consultant, like us in this case, who would come in to do a report and submit that to the government for approval. So they didn't have to pay those fees anymore. And of course, less treatment was required. And for workers, methylene chloride is a pretty nasty chemical. They didn't have to handle it anymore. And so this system, although noisy, was a lot safer and it was non-toxic. Now, they still needed to treat some of their effluent, but it was only 1% of what they would have had to treat if they were still using methylene chloride for everything. And they ended up winning a national award for this project. So it's an interesting story where compliance violations actually led to a national award. A very, very different outcome from what they had started with. And it's all thanks to, again, taking a step back, looking at the entire process and coming up with a better way, using a P2 approach to solve the same problem. ProClean is a washing company. So they clean bulk liquid containers. So these like 7,000 gallon cargo tanks that you see going down the highway, delivering all sorts of liquid products. They clean about 13,000 containers per year. They have 2 facilities. So this is John Corrigan, who was the owner. And this is sort of in the background what the facility looked like, these big cleaning bays where the trucks would come into. Now these containers could have food, so it could contain syrup, flour, chocolate, barley, all sorts of things like that, oils, or chemicals. So they could be hauling asphalt, soaps, any other type of chemical product you can imagine. The problem for ProClean was the residual heel, they called it. So it's the remaining product that's left in the tanks. These tankers go to their destination, they unload their flour, unload their oil, or whatever it is, but there's always a little bit remaining at the bottom. And those trucks would go to ProClean. ProClean would clean them out for the next service. And another problem was the wastewater from cleaning. So they clean out these trucks. If all those chemicals go to the drain, again, that can create issues of bylaw compliance and just putting nasty chemicals into the environment. So what was happening was, say this chemical truck would come into the facility, it'd have some heel left over, so residual product. ProClean would need to drain that out before they could properly clean the truck. Next truck comes in containing a different product. They would go, again, dump it into the tank. ProClean would clean it. So eventually you get this situation where this is tank full of different chemicals and all sorts of things that are mixed together. And then they would pay a hauler to come and take it away for them because they couldn't put it down the drain. A lot of it was not treatable. And it was very expensive to have to pay for a licensed hazardous waste hauler to come take that waste away for them. So essentially, a new process was, well, why don't you put chemical A into the chemical A tank, chemical B into the chemical B tank, et cetera, et cetera. So segregate them and divert them instead of mixing them all together. And so an example of that was with asphalt. So they installed an asphalt recapture system. So every truck that had asphalt, they'd dump all the heels into the same tank. And then the asphalt supplier actually would buy back that asphalt from them because they could reprocess it. So it cost them about $2,500 to implement the system. I think it was just a spare tank they had. But it saved them over $11,000 per year by sending this asphalt back to the supplier, getting revenue from that instead of having to deal with it on site or having somebody to pay to come haul it off as hazardous waste. This project was part of a larger toxics reduction project we're doing with them. And so similar to before, we looked at different processes, identified the substances in those processes. This was the particular action plan for ProClean and the different methods that were identified that they could undertake. Again, what we think the estimated reductions were, vetted these with John and his team, and then calculated savings and payback for that. So just the toxics reduction savings alone were over $4,000 in the first year with a 1-month payback. So $4,000, isn't a lot of money, but a 1-month payback, that's pretty quick. And still $4,000 is money in the bank for a company like ProClean. We included other things in the assessment. So not just looking at toxics. So we also looked at water conservation and looking at all these things together. The total savings were over $500,000 per year with a 5-month payback. So again, using this P2 approach, it helps you to identify really strong opportunities for reduction. Then food was also a problem. Surprisingly, you think, well, what's wrong with food? Can't you just put it down the drain? But again, it's expensive for bylaw compliance because, sugars is very high in BOD, biochemical oxygen demand. So it's very expensive to pay a surcharge to the municipality to dump that down the sewer. And actually ProClean was paying about $18,000 per month to put their food down the sewer for the municipal wastewater treatment system to deal with it. It's very expensive to treat on site. And it's also, food, is there a better use for that? So similar to the example before with the chemicals, instead of mixing all these food heels into one common tank and having to deal with this big tank of food waste, which just cost them $18,000 a month by discharging it to the sewer, again, find another use for it. So maybe a fertilizer factory will take some food type to blend it in their fertilizers, or a pig farmer might take your chocolate waste or your sugar waste and feed it to his pigs and give you a small amount for that food. So again, diverting the food waste from the sewers by sending it back to factories or finding alternate uses for it, it was a way to reduce their sewer surcharge. And so there, as I mentioned, there are two Proclean facilities. The first one is over about $69,000 in your savings, and then facility 2 saved $82,000 just on these types of food opportunities alone. And then they still needed treatment for what was residual, but before P2, they would have been dealing with something like this, very expensive, large volumes of wastewater to deal with. But after P2, so diverting the chemicals, diverting the food as much as possible, it was much less to deal with. They can install treatment. And there's actually a 99.6% reduction in their surcharges because they're able to deal with it well. And then the last example in this section is just, this might be something you have at your facility when you get bulk chemical deliveries. There's a common situation where you have this ramp at the bottom. I don't know why they put storm drains. And so if something spills inside, it's going to go straight to the storm drain by gravity. They're storing liquid totes. Again, if a truck backs into those or a tote fails, a valve fails, we're right down the storm sewer to the environment. And so this is a sort of an illustration of what's going on there. It's on a ramp, gravity's working against you here. A tote goes inside the facility, right down the sewer. Your truck empties, goes right down the sewer. It can be a disaster for the environment, very heavy fines. And so the solution there was we installed a post indicator valve. So during normal operations, the valve would be open that allow rainwater to keep going through that storm sewer as it was designed. And then when a truck came, they would close it. So it would capture, as you can see in the diagram here, or prevent any spills from getting to the sewer. So there's this valve on top that they would take, this handle comes off and they turn it, and then this says closed. When the truck delivery is done, they take that same valve and put it to open again. So let's take a step back. One question might be, well, those solutions seem pretty easy to me, aren't they? Aren't they obvious? And I think it helps to take a look and put yourself in the person's shoes, and you in the audience would be very familiar with this because it might be your role. These three different people, for example, and they have different things they're thinking about. CEOs thinking about profit and shareholders, QA, QC, new processes, we have to validate a new process for a client, plant manager, equipment breakdown, safety audit, staff turnover. That's a real occurring thing for us. We find is that you go one day and you're dealing with one plant manager, you go a week later and there's turnover, there's somebody new. And so these people are dealing with product out the door, they're dealing with customers and shareholders. They just don't have a lot of time to be able to figure out, thanks, that's a good idea, but how much is it costing us? How much are we losing? Where's it coming from? How are we going to address the issue? How's the expenses going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where, you as the P2 hero can take this on and bring them the answers that they need and make the business case for them to implement these solutions. So in our experience, that's why what seemed like obvious solutions aren't being implemented, because there's no P2 champion whose time is dedicated to looking at these things, because everybody's so busy concerned about getting product out the door, satisfying customers. And finally, tracking results. As I mentioned, here's some tools that you may want to look into. This is for tracking water consumption. They're a type that you just strap onto your meter in your facility, and it reads the pulse and tracks water consumption. This is an ultrasonic flow meter, so it has sensors you clamp onto a pipe, and then it has a logger that reads the flow and records it as well. And the value of this type of thing is we're monitoring actually currently for a customer. We have a contract to do real-time water monitoring for them. And in the data in our monthly report, our employee found that this was some normal consumption of the facility. Then all of a sudden there's this abnormal consumption. So almost twice as much consumption as what was normal. And this would not have been seen if they weren't, again, tracking and measuring their water use. And as it turned out, somehow a ball valve was adjusted. I'm sure you've all seen ball valves before. This is what one looks like, but the amount you open it has a very different effect on the flow that goes through it. So you just nudge it a bit and you get way more flow through it. They figured out, that's what's going on. They adjusted the ball valve and they're back to the normal consumption. Similarly, for energy consumption, these orange items here. You put them on the phases of your 3-phase wire going into your panel for whatever piece of equipment you want to monitor, whether it's an air compressor or anything else. And again, you can get real-time data of what your kilowatt usage is, helps you identify problems, helps you figure out if you have capacity in that panel board to add more equipment. And then finally, as another example for thermal energy, temperature, measuring temperature is a great way to figure out what's going on. So when I mentioned before about the process integration study, is a really good tool to figure out the temperatures coming out of heat exchangers. So what's the temperature going into this heat exchanger? What's the temperature coming out? What's our wastewater temperature? Are we losing heat through our wastewater? And yeah, heat sink and source matching can be used by looking at the temperature differentials. And you can get into fairly complex calculations for calculating BTUs based on the temperature and the type of substance that you're looking at. So it gets into kind of detailed geeky stuff, but just temperature is a very valuable thing to monitor as well. So those are the types of tools that we rely on for tracking savings, also identifying additional savings. So just to wrap it all up, overall, pollution prevention is a systematic approach, which is why it's so powerful, as we saw in those case studies we went through for your facility or for any type of industry. It addresses root causes. It just doesn't deal with problems or cleaning up waste. It prevents that waste from happening in the first place. You take a multimedia approach. Like I say, pollution prevention, sometimes people only think of toxic substances or pollutants or chemicals, but actually it's a wide umbrella. And as we've seen, it can include water and energy and even food waste. And by following the approach, it has environmental savings, but it can also unlock economic savings. As we saw in a lot of those examples, there's significant savings for the companies and social benefits, less hazard chemicals for your workers to deal with, a cleaner environment for the neighbors around your facility, because you're not putting out as much wastewater or strong effluent from your facility, or using as much of the water resources in your community. So we went through a lot of content there. I'm surprised I made the timing okay, because we went through a lot, and I hope it wasn't too fast, and I hope it made sense. But I believe there is time for questions now, but I'm also open later on if you want to email me. My contact info is there, and I'm sure the organizers can send you my contact info too. So yeah, Jen or
yeah, thank
James
you.
or
Thank you so much. That is so informative, and every time I see you, I'm very inspired to continue my work in this role that I'm in. And do we have any questions for Lloyd? We have a few minutes here. Anybody have
Everybody's
any
fast
burning
asleep.
questions? I know, what happened?
That's the thing about these Zoom meetings, is that you can't see your audience. You have no idea what they're doing, if they're listening or doing whatever. It's a challenging medium to do,
Yeah.
not just presenting, but viewing these is also
Yes.
a challenge.
Anybody have any questions on this presentation? Justin? I see you're unmuted. Do you have a question? There's a question in the chat here.
I have a question.
Okay.
Have you worked on projects that have heavy oil cleaning type scenarios where you have to separate out oils and other components that might have soaps and surfactants in them that you don't want to break down in filtering processes? I have a lot of processes like that, and we basically encompass them all in one area and evaporate water down.
Right.
So the idea is, in what I was intrigued about in a lot of your presentations was splitting the waste streams further upstream, and I think that's an opportunity for us, but I didn't know if you had any insight into that area. Perhaps that would help us in searching for a way to go about it at the process washing point of the upstream process.
Yeah, I mean, without having seen the process, there's only so much I can say, but that is the type of situation we come across. And we have now wastewater experts in our company who could if it had to be treated, what's the best way to deal with it? But I think you hit the nail on the head. We always recommend, and we look upstream, where are the waste streams coming from? And you can divert the clean streams as much as possible from the final collection area, because we know that water is very expensive to evaporate. So if you don't need to put water in there, don't. If you can divert your different, if it's soaps or chemicals, divert them somehow and segregate those. Those would be the types of approach that we would take. And it sounds like you get it, and that's the type of thing that you would look at. But yeah, that's certainly the type of scenario we come up with quite often. Though personally, I'm not sure what insight I can provide specifically to your situation, but I believe taking this type of approach could help you with that.
We had another question from Derek. He asked, what do you see as an ideal return on investment to push forward a project, looking at the bottom line, not taking into account any environmental impact?
In our experience, 2 years is typical for straight line payback. A lot of people use straight line payback, even though with currency things fluctuate, so it's not the most accurate business marker for making decisions, but it's very common. So typically 2 years and under is a threshold. We have come across companies who were up to 5 years, especially if there's environmental benefit. Now there's certain industries that they want like a 6-month payback on things, and so unfortunately that it's very difficult to get ahead because it's very hard to find 6-month payback opportunities like we often do. But you're restricting, what you can do by having such a tight payback. So I would say typically it's 2 years and under is what people are looking for.
Okay. Derek, does that answer your question? Do you have anything else? Yes, okay. And do I have anyone else who has a question?
What's been your experiences with renewable energy? Do you get requests to look at those types of things? A lot of here just recently, that's been a really big topic. We've got ways to recycle and do different things with byproduct. Or I guess what's been your experience so far with implementing new renewable energy type projects and facilities? And what's that demand look like on your end?
Yeah, I'd say it's something that people are asking for more and more. And so it is an area that we're getting into. So the Southbrook example from before had the solar panels. So that was one where we're totally for renewables. I think that we always say, again, reduce as much as possible first, and then look at renewables. We have this saying, don't waste your energy more efficiently. So reducing waste as much as possible, then looking at renewables is a good way to do that. But yeah, it's certainly something I think customers are looking more for. And in Maple Leaf's example, so they weren't able to hit all their GHG reductions just by in-plant measures, though it got them a big chunk of the way there. So then by reducing as much as possible in their plant for their scope 1, scope 2, and all the rest of their emissions, they did invest in renewable energy projects as a carbon offset. So I think it's more emerging. We typically would, if we see an opportunity, we'd bring in a partner vendor to provide, a detailed quote or a design for it. So whenever we see an opportunity where it'd be a really good application for a renewable, or the customer asks us, then we would bring in the appropriate expertise to be able to get that done for them. So we don't necessarily design it on our own, but we would bring in the proper expert to be able to do so.
Okay, looks like we're almost out of time for this session. Are there any last minute questions? Okay. Thank you so much again, Lloyd, for joining us. And as Lloyd said, please feel free to note his email address from his presentation slide there. And we can also follow up with his email address for you. And if you are interested in working with them, I'm sure that they could possibly come down to the States. But I know that you've done some work in the past in the States. So, and it sounds like you currently have someone in California. So thank you so much for your time and your vision in the P2 world. So
Very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much again for the opportunity, and thank you everybody for listening. And don't hesitate to email me afterwards if you have further questions.
thank you.
Thank you.
We now have a quick break just to get up and stretch, just a 10-minute break, and we will get ready for our next session. We're doing a liberating structures exercise, and this will be a great opportunity for you to get a chance to speak with others here today about solutions to your issues at your facility. So I look forward to seeing you back here at 1:40 Eastern Time. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully everybody came back refreshed and ready to go. And let me see. I'd like to share. So our next session is, all right, there we go. Our next session is a liberating structures exercise. And for those of you that are not familiar with this concept, I was recently introduced to liberating structures via a course that I'm taking. And it's a way to use some different techniques within meetings to engage participation. So relating that to what Lloyd was just talking about, if you have meetings with your internal holders or external stakeholders for that matter, you could take a look at the website for liberatingstructures.com. These were a couple of social engineers who put together 33 different structures that are available on that website that you can implement at your next meeting. So today we are doing a structure called 1, 2, 4, all. And this is an opportunity for us to do breakout rooms and to have a conversation with your colleagues. So first we're going to ask you to do a 1-minute self-reflection. And we ask that you time yourself for that 1 minute. And I will also set a timer for us. And our question of the day is, what's one challenge that you have right now related to meeting a specific environmental goal? And what are your personal thoughts about opportunities that you see for making progress on this challenge? And how would you handle the situation, and what ideas or actions that do you recommend? You're just going to take 1 minute to think about that. And I've given you the question. I'm going to finish going through this exercise. So you have maybe a little bit longer to think about that. And so then after that 1 minute, I will be putting you into breakout rooms of 2 people per room. You'll need to designate a timer and take some notes in your group. And then you're going to compare notes from your self-reflection. And then after that 2 minutes, so one person will do 1 minute share and the other person will listen and then switch. The next thing we will do is put you into groups of 4, and each will share your what you learned in that reflection with the other person, and also develop additional ideas with one another for some solutions or to your challenges. And then at the end of those 4 minutes, we might stretch it to 5 minutes. I don't know, but I think we'll keep it to 4 minutes. We'll see how we are. I might put a note up to check on you guys. So, but make one person your reporter, and that person will report out to the main group after the conversation. So you'll be reporting out what things are you taking away from this exercise in your group? What things stood out as possible solutions to issues that you're having? So hopefully that's clear. Are there any questions? Got some folks that have to drop off for a minute and maybe be back. Okay. So I think I will not be in the groups, and Jean, I think, may not be in unless we need someone to add to another pair. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Is everyone ready? Okay. And you will not be recorded in the breakouts. I will actually stop the recording. You will not be recorded in those discussions. So go ahead and take 1 minute for your own self-reflection. What is one area that you are experiencing challenges that in your meeting your environmental goals that you would like to make progress on, and what are opportunities or small implementable actions that you could take? So go ahead and start. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry for the confusion. There were a few folks that didn't join in our exercise, so I had to move folks around. Hopefully you had a good opportunity to speak to one another.
We did.
Good. And now is our opportunity to hear from each group what you learned or what your takeaways are from your group. And so since I wasn't in each group with the spokesperson for the first group, go ahead and report out.
Who would the first group be? Because I'm on the phone. I don't have slides or video.
Oh, okay, let me see if I can pull that back up. I'm not sure that I can see the breakout rooms. Let's see, I had Craig, Derek, and Lexi in a room. Someone from room 1, go.
I don't know that we had necessarily a spokesperson when we got in the group. Craig and I were discussing some of the challenges of our industry as a whole. We kind of share some of the common labor problems that are spurring problems that we're seeing. I know for us, it's, with everything with the pandemic, kind of tightening budgets, things have been put on hold for projects and kind of postponing.
Boy,
So
that sounds
did you come up with any ideas on how to move any of your projects forward?
Once we got going, the breakout sessions ended.
Oh no. Okay. All right. So room 3 was Jean, John, and a number from Northern Indiana.
Yeah, this is John. So actually it turned out that, Jean didn't actually have a problem. She just joined us, but our problems were similar. They were both somewhat wastewater related. And so one problem involved an oily wastewater discharge that is expensive to treat. And the solution on that looks like a oil water separator and then ultrafiltration after that, before that water is discharged to POTW. And of course, payback on that's usually not great, but there is some opportunity to actually sell that oil potentially, if depending upon what its BTU value is for fuel. Our problem at our plant is around, we know that our NPDES permit is renewing early next year, but the site currently is right in the middle of transition between water treatment chemical providers, which is going to be interesting because the new providers coming in on January 1st and our applications due on February 1st. So we really aren't going to have very much time under our belt under a new provider to see what their chemical regime is actually going to do. And we're anticipating a new phosphorus discharge limit. So we think from calculations that we're going to be okay with what the limit's going to be, but we're not certain, it's one of those situations. So both of ours involve some timing aspects and approvals, the lengthy approvals from corporate or whoever, approvals on my end from really just going through the mechanics of changing water treatment providers, and then preparation and other things like that. So.
Okay. And was there, so it's a common step forward is just to get those initial approvals?
Well, yeah, I guess the earlier you can get those. See, we were hoping actually to be able to bring the water treatment provider in earlier, but utilities is really driving most of that, and there's a lot of things they have to do also. A lot of procedures have to change. Their staff have to be trained on the new chemicals. There's just physically transitioning from one chemical supplier to another. Physically changing over totes or tanks or whatever it is that you're. Yeah, it's just, and it's of course challenging toward the end of the year also. So.
Yeah, right. Okay. And we also had room 5, which was Christy, Heipel, and Justin, and a number, and Toby.
I think we actually talked about a couple different things. It was a nice conversation. I think from a broad perspective, getting past the day to day, as an environmental professional, you kind of touch every aspect of the facility, all the engineers and facilities and different aspects, and getting past the day-to-day activities to implement or plan and implement projects, to reduce or whatever you're doing on your at your facility. And so I think maybe an incremental step to in improving that would be to reach out and like I use some engineers. I'll grab an engineer or a black belt to help planning phases and things like that. And I think another aspect of our conversation was at times it's hard to implement projects, especially, for example, my facility and another facility in our group, we use a lot of diesel, just as a nature of our business for testing things, and so when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and things like that, it's hard to plan when it's part of the quality of your product that you're selling. So that's another aspect.
So looking at, so holistically, when a product is going through, do you have a planning process up front to include the environmental piece and potential pollution prevention opportunities?
Yeah, I think that was, one aspect well, I can speak for my facility. We always take into account, environmental, when we plan new projects and things like that. So wherever there's room to reduce, we do. But again, when you're building engines and you're building diesel engines or another product that uses a fuel, that's just part of it, And so I think from a product side, you see improvements in products from everybody year after year because, to reduce the amount of impact they have, from a product side, right? So you have more environmentally friendly engines that you're putting out, so lower NOx and things like that.
Right.
So yes, it's always part of the planning.
Okay. So room 7 was Condell, Kevin, Megan, Scott, and Teresa. Do I have a
Yes, we had a pretty good discussion. I think part of it was our challenges were around energy in buildings that aren't owned, as well as old buildings, significantly old aged buildings, and then really on the waste side. There was some conversation about water being one of the bigger areas to reduce, but water usually has not the best return on investment if you're not really using a huge amount of it and you don't have a lot of expensive processes involved with it that will be a good return on investment, I think were the areas that we talked a little bit about, as well as alternative energy being a not very great payback unless you're using large volumes of energy, like a storage facility for people's data storage. They use tons of energy. So, see that as something that doesn't always have a great payback. It's a great news story and it gets a lot of people excited. But when you start talking to folks about financial return on investment, it generally becomes not a tough sell uphill.
Mhm. Yeah, and part of that is because water's so inexpensive in Indiana, and
Yes, and I think we're also not in what we would call a water-starved area like maybe the Southwest, but
mhm.
some of the, easier things to look at from an energy standpoint is there's still opportunity for items that are running unnecessarily on the equipment side, as well as, other things in terms of energy. On the waste side, really, is there opportunities for looking at things at the source that you can do some more work with associated with getting the waste stream cleaner or reuse or recirculating at the source versus having to generate as much. I think those are the low hanging opportunities that are available.
Yeah, thank you. So is there anyone in the group that didn't get to express their concerns or their challenge and discuss a solution with a group? And you'd like to maybe bring that up to the group at this point? Okay, everyone had a good opportunity. Next time, I think we'll allow a little bit more time for discussion in the breakout rooms. Is there anyone that would like to share a success story from 2020 that really, you felt that you accomplished even in the midst of some of the struggles that we had last year?
Such a quiet group here.
We were able to, we implemented a solvent recovery system in at the very end of last year. We were able to do all the planning and implement that at the end of the year. And as a result, we've been able to reduce 76% of our hazardous waste. So that's
Awesome.
it's been a big success, through everything we went through last year. That was that was kind of a bright, shiny spot for us. So
Great. Okay. Anybody else? Scott?
We were able to do a relamp project, which was a bit of a surprise because we were able to partner with someone and not have to do a capital expense, not only in one building, but we were able to do it in both buildings. And we were pretty much done here with a few more lights before the end of the year. So that was really a year and a half of work that I was trying to work on to get done internally, and it just sort of fell in place pretty much probably right after the summer. And we were also continued and moved along with implementing reusable wipes versus disposable. That seemed to take well with people on the shop floor that I thought was going to be a challenge. So those were probably the two areas that we moved the needle a bit this year with all the other challenges.
Great. Good to hear. Anybody else want to share?
We were able to work with our utility provider and their contractor to do a compressed air leak study at both our facilities. I think we had 57 leaks identified at one, 12 at another, quantified into cost savings, energy savings, And then we've got all the air leaks completed, except 2, and we'll be able to, anytime and materials we invested, we'll be able to get a rebate back from the utility provider. So that was pretty substantial for us towards energy efficiency, since we had to kind of change our target due to budgetary constraints for what was originally planned. So we're still able to chip away at it, just a little different subpart than what we were planning.
Great. And along those lines, I'm not sure where it was, but I recently heard of a camera that looks for leaks. You can purchase a camera.
Yes, the
was
report that we got, you're able to take a camera with the equipment, it identified it, color coded it, and then kind of prioritized with your usage and PSI what that savings would be. It was very beneficial to target exactly where it was from that report and not have to guess.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that could be a something that other facilities really should look into to reduce all those compressor leaks, compressed air leaks. I saw 260-636-4205. Are you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So we did a 102,000 square foot extension onto our building starting in August of last year. And part of that, we were able to apply internally within Bosch for a grant, energy grant, to turn a portion of that extension to be powered with the photovoltaic panels, solar panels. We did get that approved. We were not able to get them installed over the winter time due to some lead time issues. Not that we aren't all having supply chain issues at the moment, but we do have those ordered, and we're going to be installing them this summer to help with us getting to carbon neutral as part of an overall Bosch environmental initiative, not only in North America, but globally. So we'll be able to have a portion of our building be on solar panel, capture that information, and then report it within our sustainability that we track monthly. So we're looking forward to being able to do that.
Fantastic. Any other shares? Okay. No other hands? Okay. I did want to share a thought that we've been having with your, we know that your ongoing targets and objectives, for your EMS. Sometimes you've already achieved the goals, and other times there may not be anything that's moving at this moment related to those. We have as I mentioned earlier, we are renewing the Clean Community Challenge. And one of the areas that we were looking at with that program is to have a partnership with the ESP members in their communities. And I think as one of the goals that you could potentially pick for future ESP initiatives. Any thoughts on that being an option for you? Does that help you in committing certain things to ESP program?
I think it'd be helpful if we were aware, at least if our community or somebody in our county was already working on that. You know, especially for some of the rural areas, we may not even be aware that somebody's, that the local county or one of the local cities has that on the radar screen. So.
Sure. Yeah. What we were thinking was when a city or town or county join the program, to make sure that you that are located within that area would know that the community is joining our clean program, and that there might be potential partnerships there on their projects that they are committing to do. We have a selection list of 30 identified projects that will be available to clean communities to choose from. And this is different than our previous program. It's gone a little bit different direction because it was very difficult for the communities to develop their own EMS-like system, which was the quality of life plan. And they had struggles because of all of the documentation and the, as you all know very well, with your EMS systems, the continued maintenance of those documents and then transition with mayors changing and different priorities changing. So we have modified the program to be more of a certification program where they come in and they do various projects and achieve different levels of participation. So our goal is just to encourage communities and cities, towns to make progress on their environmental goals, and to share those results across the state with other communities, just like we do in this program. We're sharing ideas and sharing the pollution prevention concepts with each other that may be able to be transferred from one to another. So that's our goal in that program, to be able to learn from implementation of various projects around the state. Our goal is to roll that whole, we're in a pilot with it right now. We have 6 communities currently participating through June of next year. They do each have a paid intern from IU that IDEM gave a grant to IU to pay those students and put those within each of the communities. So we are excited to get the results of those first 6 pilot communities, and then to actually get the program rolled out once the rule is in place. That rulemaking takes 18 months, and so we do have a little bit more wait time before we can fully roll out the entire program, which looks like it'll be early in 2023 for that. Our current participants are the City of Fishers, Beech Grove, Richmond, Maryville, Nashville, Brown County, and who did I miss? Zionsville. I think that was 6. So if you are in any of those areas, those communities are currently working with us, and there's a potential there for partnership. We will be putting more information online about that project with them. And so we wanted to offer that as a potential for future initiatives within your ongoing commitment to IDEM through this program. Jean, is there anything that you wanted to say?
No, but thank you, everybody. I guess I'll put in another pitch for filling out and submitting the evaluation survey so that Jennifer and I can get some ideas from you. Since that rule is open, if there are ways in which we could revamp the ESP program, since it is within the same rule as the clean program, it would be really nice to hear from you about that. And then as well, the incentives, would love to be able to get some of your ideas of what you think would be really good incentives for you and the other members, since you guys are in hands-on all the time it'd be good to get something direct from you. So please take a few minutes. It's not a very long survey, but take those few minutes and fill that in for us, which really help us out a lot. It's been a really great group today, and it's so good to hear everybody's voices and know that the plants are functioning and things are working, and we're still making some progress. And I just, again, just want to thank you for your participation today, and all the best to you.
Any last minute comments or questions? We're giving you back a half hour of your day, so.
Thank you for all your efforts in the presentations and great information.
You're welcome. And as we mentioned earlier, this recording will be available for you, and we will send that out to you all. I don't think we'll be posting it to the ESP page, but just send it to the members. Any other comments or questions?
Thanks, Jennifer. Great job.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you.
Everybody have a great day. Thanks.
Take care.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.